All right, we are now about 24 hours away from the final presidential debate. According to the latest poll of likely voters, President Obama, Governor Mitt Romney are now in a dead heat, tied for the White House. So how likely is it that tomorrow night's debate will have any impact at all? Let's bring in our campaign insiders. John LeBoutillier, former Republican congressman for New York. Pat Caddell, Fox News contributor, former pollster for President Jimmy Carter. Doug Schoen, he too a Fox News contributor and a former pollster for Bill Clinton. All right. Is the race, Doug, basically tied?
Yes, I believe it is tied, but there's a but, Greg. And that but is that the movement has been recently to Governor Romney. Some of the more left-wing commentators have tried to suggest that there was a blip up for President Obama after the debate, which, according to some of the polls, he won. But bottom line, looking at all the polls, the NBC poll, Rasmussen, Gallup, and a number of state polls, I think we're seeing that the movement to the governor is clear.
See, now I'm glad you brought up Rasmussen and Gallup. Let's put this up on the screen. Here's Rasmussen. It has Romney up by 2. And look at the Gallup daily tracking poll, Pat Caddell. Romney is up, and this is as of 1 o'clock this afternoon. Romney's up +7. Now, is that Gallup poll accurate or an outlier?
Well, I think at the moment it's an outlier because I have a problem with these 7-day, I don't want to get in the weeds too much, but these rolling samples and people coming in and out. Well, partly because you're putting in like 350 interviews, which is a margin of error is about 7 points or more. And every day you're taking one out and you're throwing them in. But inexorably, Obama's leading. You know my rule of thumb, I take Gallup, I take Rasmussen, I divide by 2, might do a little bit more than that. But Rasmussen shows now in the swing states Romney up for. I think if you look at this race, it's what Doug said exactly.
Yeah.
It's very close, but it's inexorably moving to Romney. But don't forget, there has always been, there may not be a bump out of the debate, but historically, the beginning of the week after, the last week of the campaign, the incumbent gets a little bounce.
Right.
Then the challenger might get the undecided.
Well,
we'll see if that holds up.
You know, the national polls, Congressman, are interesting, but I like looking at the electoral map. And let's take a look at the Real Clear Politics electoral map. This is based on an average of polls within the states. The yellow, obviously, are some of the toss-ups right now, but the total number here is dramatically different than 4 weeks ago when all of us were sitting here and Obama was within 10 points electoral votes of the 270 needed. Now look at him. Obama's at 201, Romney's at 206.
Well, the big thing on that map is all the yellow states in the upper Midwest, from Pennsylvania, which we had thought was solid for Obama, back in play, according to the Real Clear Politics average. Same with Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin. They're fertile states that could turn for Romney here at the end with very little campaigning done. You never see these candidates in Minnesota. They haven't been there.
Yeah. I want to throw up the Gallup poll on approval numbers.
Sure.
Let's take a look at this. The president's Gallup number is +4. Juxtapose Rasmussen, and he's underwater, -2. What do you make of this, Doug?
Well, here's what I would do. I would take the approval number in both polls, it's 49. And that's about the level I would hypothesize, I suspect Pat would probably agree, the incumbent is likely to get. Now, if the incumbent gets 49 and Governor Romney gets almost 99% of the outstanding vote, we're in a very, very close election. So while the two polls are disparate, ultimately I draw the same conclusion from them.
And one of them is likely voters, one is adults. That's part of the change. But look, Doug's absolutely right. I've said all along, if the approval, Obama's hovering at a very critical point. He goes down a couple points and he's a sure loser.
50 is the critical mass.
50 is 49, 50 is critical case. But to the point that John made that's important, state like Pennsylvania, which I believe that we all thought was out of reach at one point, it's the second oldest state after Florida, doesn't like Obamacare, and it is had problems with Romney as a person. Every poll shows that there's been no money there. That's a big state.
Now, I'm told you guys are interested in Iowa and Wisconsin. Let's take a look at these NBC Marist polls. Obama's got a substantial lead, +8 in Iowa, +6 in Wisconsin. John?
Well, first of all, Pat is laughing.
I'm sorry.
Which is okay, because he has had a consistent problem with this particular polling arrangement with Marist and the Wall Street Journal and NBC. And there's a PPP polling company which skews left, right? They're pro-Obama, you could say. They're in both those states, have a 1-point lead for Obama in each state.
Yeah, the data I've seen, Greg, private data is showing in Iowa a much closer race.
Right. I want to talk
Every
about
bit
Florida.
of data. You know what? You'd have to believe, Doug, just understand.
Yeah.
You'd have to believe that since September, we had no first debate, nothing happened.
I want to talk about Florida because it's, it's a critical state, 29 electoral votes. And, the president was ahead in Florida not long ago. Now look at it. 8-point swing in 1 month, Romney +3. And if you dig deeper, look at women, an 18-point swing to Mitt Romney. And let's go to the next poll while we're at it here. Look at the economy. Romney is ahead by 7 points. Who do you trust to handle the economy?
Greg,
Gentlemen?
Greg, let me just say one thing. I believe these numbers are probably pretty close. But if you notice, in the last week, both the president and the governor have spent a lot of time in Florida. The governor's spending the weekend there doing his debate prep because he has to win Florida. It's gravy, it's icing on the cake for the president. He doesn't have to win it. Right. He's still pushing there. He's spending a lot of money there to tie Romney down there.
Right.
So they think that state is still winnable for either guy.
Put up Ohio, because this is interesting also. The president had a huge lead, now not so much. Doug?
Yeah, that's the key. John was alluding to it, Greg. Bottom line, if the president holds, and I know it's an if, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Bottom line, he wins Ohio. That's effectively the ball game. With a 3-point lead in his vote at 46, that state's in play in a way it hasn't been.
Yeah, but the problem is with both it and Florida, there's been so much money spent, particularly in Ohio, that they're not moving. These are not moving as fast as the states where no money's been spent, no time has been spent. They're moving on the national trends. Ohio may have been poisoned, in my opinion. That's why I think the Republicans have got to make a broader reach for some of these other states.
All right, when we come back, I want to show a couple of ads, because after 8 months of negative ads, the Obama campaign suddenly is positive. And guess what Romney's doing? Just the opposite.
And we have a future in our plan now.
When you look at the president's plan, I don't think there can be any question that we're on the right course for today's economy.
President Obama does get what people need, and that's jobs and the opportunity to help themselves.
Now, you probably haven't seen that before, because the president has spent 8 months and tens of millions of dollars on negative ads attacking Mitt Romney. All of a sudden now positive ads talking about the president himself. Back with our campaign insiders, what's the deal?
Well, I think the deal's pretty simple. You only change traffic, as we say in the business, when your ads aren't working. The governor was successful in the first debate in making himself reasonable, inclusive, centrist, as we've been recommending. Bottom line, the negative ads have stopped working. President Obama, to get from that 49% approval up to 50 or 51, has gone positive in a really pretty desperate attempt to change the direction of the election.
So Romney is no longer the three-headed boogeyman, the plutocrat, who only cares about white tie and tails. Yep. His joke notwithstanding at the Al Smith dinner, which was very funny. Here is his newest ad. Take a look at this.
His policies haven't worked. Median income's down $4,300 a family, and 23 million Americans out of work. He said that he'd cut in half the deficit. He just hasn't been able to put in place reforms for Medicare and Social Security.
All right, Pat, you got to love irony, because now Obama's negative, or Romney's negative.
Right. Well, he's doing what he wants to do now because he's been using the debates for his positive, which is saying, do you really want to keep the same for the next 4 years? And that, he knows, for undecided voters and those squishy voters, that's what they're weighing, him versus that. But I think they need to do that. All
right, tomorrow night is the final debate, the third and final debate, but the subject matter is foreign policy. And if you look at any poll, they'll tell you that, about 5 or 6 or 10% max of likely voters care about foreign policy in terms of their vote. Yeah, well, so is anybody going to tune in and pay attention and care?
Oh, yeah. They're going to watch.
Why?
Well, because they've watched the other two debates. This is the greatest show on earth, is this campaign. People are watching the debates. Even with Monday Night Football, they'll watch the debate. And if what we've been saying for the last 20 minutes is true, that the race is basically tied. Either guy can win or lose.
So they're looking for something.
Every event, Greg, from now on is crucial. And a mistake tomorrow night or a home run by either guy.
Nobody's going to make a mistake tomorrow night.
But we have Libya. And you know what? That was an issue that was sort of maybe a ground rule double last time, or a...
courtesy of Candy Crowley.
Exactly. put another way, it's effectively a do-over. It's a moment of both high suspense, high drama, and real interest, because in real time we have the question of what the president is going to do, what Governor Romney's critique is, and we didn't get that question answered.
Yeah, we didn't get it answered, and there are many more. And I'm telling you, I've been doing polling for Secure America Now, bipartisan polling. I mean, there are issues like China that matter, Muslim extremism matters. But here's the point for Romney. He needs to go in there and do what Reagan did. We tried in 1980, the Carter campaign, to make Reagan the ogre, that he was going to blow the country up. By having that debate, when he got, people think he won because he said, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? No, he won when he won when he said, I have grandchildren, children, and I don't want to start a war. Peace through
When
strength.
Libya and Benghazi came out of the last debate, and the president turned to Romney squarely for the first time, really looking at him and said, how dare, I'm paraphrasing, how dare you suggest that I'm trying to politicize this? This is not what my presidency is about. You could hear a pin drop. It was an incredible moment for the president. He's going to do it again.
What worries me about that the other night and everything, every time Romney wades in to the topic of foreign affairs, he steps all over himself. The trip to England for the Olympics, the press conference the day of the Cairo riots, this thing the other night was teed up for him to hit it right out of the ballpark. He fumbled it, to mix metaphors.
Yeah, but he's spent the time since then perfecting his response now, hasn't he?
And this is a time when the country, as I think Pat pointed out, is uniquely focused on an event that took 4 heroic Americans on 9/11. The question is, where do we go? Why did it happen? What do we do?
Yeah, and I think that Romney flinched. I think standing there with the president, I don't think he'll flinch.
Well, he may have been thrown off by Crowley.
He
certainly was. But he was a little bit. But I could see him pulling back. But I want to tell you, I think that this Libyan thing is really huge, and they've got to answer it. And look, we have there's an ad running now by saying there's a flag hanging over, a Al-Qaeda flag over our embassy in Cairo. What a symbol.
Greg, we also have the issue of the moderator again tomorrow night. Bob Schieffer, the most experienced of all these guys.
He's not going to pull a boneheaded move.
No, but he may very well want to be a big player in this thing.
I don't think so, John. I think he'll stay out.
I think he will.
I think
and
smart,
if for no other reason than he doesn't want to be the next Kenny Crowley.
Exactly.
All right, you can get more from the Campaign Insiders every Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, live.foxnews.com, and they will be back here next Sunday. You can also follow them on Twitter at FN Insiders. Now, I want to come back to you guys because I want to talk a little bit about George McGovern, who passed away. He was the 1972 Democratic nominee. Pat, you worked for him.
I was 21 years old. I was his pollster. It was my first campaign. It was a wonderful experience. George McGovern, I've known honorable people in politics. He was one of the most, if not the most honorable, with Jimmy Carter I've known. He was an American hero, war hero. He stood up for principle. He led the Food for Peace. He changed the Democratic Party, not only to bring me to politics and hundreds of, or thousands like me, but a President Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Gary Hart, all kinds of people. He was a giant. And you know what? I was never not proud. We lost, but we lost to a terrible, evil administration. I've never been more proud than the work for George McGovern.
He always said that his timing was off in 1972.
Well, his timing may have been off, but he was a man who wouldn't play politics with his war record. Pat was right.
Yes,
he was a war hero.
Oh, sure.
He wouldn't use
35 missions over Germany.
But I think,
most any president
but the lesson we draw from this is that there is honor in politics, there is leadership, and there is morality.
Johnny was widely respected.
Oh, I think there's no doubt. And I think if you look back now 40 years later, the stance he took, which was not popular, by the way, people have forgotten that to be against the war then was not an easy position to take. The majority of people had been fooled over Vietnam. They've now come to see what a disaster that war was. He was ahead of the game.
All right. George McGovern, really one of America's great politicians, and he'll long be remembered. We'll be right back.